Okay, so this is day two of Mishlei 1515. And I actually caught a few things we missed. So we'll review first. Kol yemei ani ra'im v'tov lev mishtatamid. So all the days of a poor person are bad, but tov lev, we said, seems to make sense as an adjective. A person who is tov lev, mishtatamid. So we translate it as is feasting constantly, which is not a bad translation, but I realize it's a little imprecise that mishte tamid means mishte is a noun, right? So literally it would be is a constant feast. Okay, so is a constant feast. And then I think the cleanest way to deal with this is the Ibn Kaspi. So Ibn Kaspi says in his first commentary, Tov lev mishte tamid chaser beis kmo beis Hashem. So for example, you have this pasuk in Malachim beis Yud beis Yud Aleph, Vayal sofer hamelech v'hakohen hagadol v'yatsur v'yimnus hakesef hanimsa beis Hashem. So they counted the silver that is found beis Hashem. So it clearly means found in the beis Hashem, not found beis Hashem. And then same thing here. He says, Vatam kibal. Okay, so he also goes with the Saudi going saying kibal seichel sameach tami iluhu omed b'mishteh. It's as if he's in a mishteh. Okay, or the simpler thing is the second Ibn Kaspi appears just says mishteh b'mishteh. Okay, so I think that's the easiest thing is in a constant feast. Okay, fine. So there's that. All right. So our questions were, what is the subject of the pasuk? Related, what decision-making scenario are we talking about here? And I do think still that there are two basic ways you could take it. Is the pasuk talking about just the full range of human experience and saying you could either be an ani within that and have your days be bad, or be a tov lev and have your days be like a constant party? Or is the whole thing talking about an ani, that all the days of an ani are bad, but if he's an ani who has tov lev, then it's mishta tamid? I think those, like, I don't know if those are the only two ways to take it, but those I think like are the most directly suggested by the straight reading. Okay, three. What is the meaning of ani in this context? That's obviously going to be a major question. Four. Oh, and we also just to bring to mind or just to review here, Sadigon translated as Kol yemei chalush hadas ra'im. All the days of the weak-minded are bad. V'tov halev mishta tamid, v'tuv halev mishta tamid. But the goodness of heart is a perpetual feast. Okay, so he takes ani as ein ani ela badas, like Chazal, that ani is poor in knowledge. Okay, so it seems like the meforshim are kind of evenly split about whether whether ani here means ani badas or not. Okay, four, in what sense do we mean ra'im? Five, what does tov lev mean? So A, does lev mean heart, emotions, or mind, intellect, or something else? B, does tov refer to some objective perfection or to a subjective or relative state? C, is tov lev an adjective meaning a glad-hearted person, or is it a noun, gladness of heart? Okay, six, is it necessarily a good thing to be tov lev all the time? Is the pasuk even suggesting that, or is it just saying if you are tov lev, then you'll experience mishta tamid? Seven, what does mishta tamid mean? In what sense is the tov lev equated with mishta tamid? Is mishta tamid necessarily a good thing? Oh, I guess I asked that. Oh no, I know this is a different question. On the one hand, it's fun. On the other hand, it seems more like an ahasuerisian value than a Torah value, meaning just to be constantly like partying. Eight. Oh, and I'm gonna just add on to this. And either way, why use such a, I guess hedonistic is the normal term, to frame this. Okay. Eight, what do we make of the absolutist language of kol yamim and tamid? To what extent is this literally true? Are all the days of the ani bad? And is the tov lev experiencing a mishteh all the time, or is this hyperbolic? Nine, what are the opposites? Usually the opposite of ani is ashir, which is seemingly not mentioned in the pasuk. Is ani being contrasted with tov lev or with mishteh tamid? It's unclear. 10, oh wow, there's a lot of questions here. Are the people or qualities in the two halves of the pasuk mutually exclusive, like our translations, most of our translations imply? Or can one person or quality in the second half, can the person or quality in the second half be embodied by the ani in the first half? In other words, is it you're an ani whose days are bad, or a tov lev whose days are mishta tamid, or is it? I guess this is kind of tied to our question about, is this about the ani? Can you be an ani whose days are bad and an ani whose lev is tov? Okay, 11. When do these results happen? Is the pasuk describing a real-time phenomenon of how these people experience life from moment to moment, or is this more of a big picture feeling they get when they reflect on their lives as a whole? And then 12. What is the practical application? How does one become a tov lev? And is the pasuk even telling us this? Is the pasuk telling us to be a tov lev, or just describing a benefit of someone who is naturally tov lev? And if so, what is the pasuk's practical application? Likewise, is this warning us about another detriment of being an ani, or is it just describing a state? Furthermore, so what? Is this pasuk assuming that the ra and the tov lev or mishteh tamid are ends in and of themselves, or are they a means to another end? Or is the pasuk not taking a stance on that? And then one question we did not ask is, what, if anything, is the relationship between this pasuk and the surrounding pasukim? And so we looked at the surrounding the previous pasukim, but we didn't look at the next one. So previous pasuk is a lev pasuk, lev sameach yetiv panim. So a happy heart improves the countenance. Uva atzvas lev, and in sadness of the heart is ruach necheya, is a crushed spirit. Then you've got our sorry, that was two pasukim ago. Then lev navon yavakesh das upnei ksil meirei veles. Then our pasuk, and then the next one definitely seems to be related. Tov me'at b'yiras Hashem me'otzar rav umahuma bo. Better a little bit in fear of Hashem than abundant treasury with mahuma, with what is that? Bruising, wounding. I don't know why it's not letting me click on it. All right, whatever. Okay, fine. Okay, so we had a couple interpretations. We had two, I guess, yesterday. So Ezra Koppel said it's about your outlook on life. So Tov Lev would seem to be seeing things in focusing on the good, and the ani would be focusing on the bad. So everyone's going to have good and bad in their lives, but the question is, how do you frame it? And the way you frame it is going to color other things as well. And like the or am I mixing it? No, I'm not mixing up two interpretations. Yeah. So we discussed briefly some strategies for this, and so there's a book plug for happiness in the face of adversity. I also mentioned gratitude of Hakara Satov does to me, and I think there's studies to support this also. I've seen Rabbi Jonathan Sachs quote the studies, but like that the practice of gratitude on a daily basis consciously does make you a happier person. And it logically makes sense, because if you notice the good and are appreciative of it, then you'll start to notice it more, and then you'll realize how much abundant good there is in your life. But this is not mutually this is not exhaustive here. I'm sure there's many more strategies. Okay, and then Isaac's idea based on Sadigon about the Ani Badas is that the Havamina is that your life is determined by your material circumstances, the quality of your life. And Kamash Malan, he's saying that having Tov Lev instead of the Tov Lev is the main determinant. And so with the Tov Lev, you'll be able to experience whatever happens to you in a way that's beneficial, whether it's by like framing it properly or thinking about it and getting ideas out of it, whatever it is. Whereas the ani, meaning the person who's weak-minded, is just going to be flung around by whatever happens to him externally. Okay, so those, yeah, Isaac, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's also specifically tapping into the like fantasy of like a constant party.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there like I've spoken to people who express this explicitly, like wanting to be wealthy so that you could be constantly like getting pleasure, basically.
Right.
And it's saying if you want the like constant constant pleasure lifestyle, this is how you do it. It's like
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, and
That's like
I feel like there are a ton of this is a good bridge pasuk from Mishlei to Koheles. I'm gonna list this pasuk also, by the way, just or list this question under the Mishteh Tamid value question, which is what would Koheles say? Because I feel like Koheles definitely is critical of that lifestyle, and this might be a good alternative. Yeah, Moshe?
Yeah, I was gonna offer an alternate
Sure.
shot. So I was thinking that the Kol Yimei Ani Rayim are meaning taking both halves of the pasuk to be talking about an ani, meaning specifically a person who's dealt a bad hand, who has a bad life. So it's saying just objectively Kol Yimei Ani Rayim is meaning his life is going to be a bad life, and it's not meaning the default is going to be that he's going to be unhappy, and his day-to-day life will be unpleasant. but it's saying that it's not the fact that you can say like external circumstances, or meaning even though it's not, he's not going to be like an idiot or like a seal, or meaning it's not using like a Mishlaic term to basically describe why he's unhappy, and it's not like a tzaddik or something is necessarily happy, because it's not I don't think it's necessarily a bad person that would be unhappy in this scenario, or necessarily that a good person would be sorry, that a bad person would be unhappy or a good person would be happy, because if you're dealt a bad hand, it's basically like the only thing that can help you, you know, with your circumstances is I'm taking Mishta Summit to be an introspection, or in, I guess, like pursuing chachma of if you're pursuing better things than just what's happening in your day-to-day life, then you're going to be, you can be feasting every day. You can still be reaping the benefits of Torah, and you could still have a tov lev, and you could still be either intelligent or happy. But the fact that your outer circumstances are terrible is basically irrelevant.
Okay, good. All right, so the idea is that even a person like this can change his internal circumstances, and therefore his experience of life. Yeah. Okay. So the reason why I like this as a separate idea is because I think I'm understanding you correctly, that this is like deliberately not being specific about what constitutes tov lev, but the emphasis is really on lev, meaning that the ani is describing the external circumstances, which will lead to a default of bad, which may not be able to be changed. But if you change your lev in many of these ways, which, you know, I don't think anyone who gives any interpretation is going to deny the truth of the other interpretations. It's just a question of what you think is most likely here. The way forward is to change your internal circumstances to be able to get Mishnah Talmud. Is that
right? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah. There's a very stoicism based idea. You know, not based idea, but like, you know, that's kind of their thing of not being able to control the external circumstances, but entirely being able to control your internal circumstances and affecting your experience. And I think also just in terms of the usage of the term, you know, I actually don't know which of the Stoics coined this term. I think it's Epictetus. But you know, you have the hardcore Stoic idea, which is that goodness and badness are only relevant to your virtue or vice. So in other words, the only, like Marcus really says, is the only thing that harms a person is that which makes him a worse person. And the only thing that can do that is really your bechira, you know. And so if you take that idea at face value, then you could have a guy who's like ravaged by illness, or like, you know, you know, in a war zone, and you know, the common sense would say, well, that's a bad state to be in, and the person and the hardcore still would say, no, it's not bad, because the only thing that's bad is that which affects your character, you know. But so that's like a little bit too hardcore. So there's a term that I think it's Epictetus uses, is there's good and bad, which is only in objective terms, okay, what it actually affects your soul. But then there's what he calls preferred indifference with a T, and dispreferred indifference, okay, which means that sickness, for example, or poverty are indifference in the sense that being poor or being sick or being wealthy and being healthy is not objectively good or bad, because it doesn't actually affect your soul. And you can have someone who's wealthy and healthy and bad, and someone who's poor and unhealthy and is good. So it's indifferent in the sense that it's indifferent to your actual like state of goodness or badness. But nevertheless, it does not mean that all indifferents are equal. Obviously, if you had it, you know, your way, you would prefer to have health and wealth than sickness and poverty. So just dividing, like, I think one of the main mistakes people make when they're operating, or when they're thinking about, you know, questions of sameach b'chalko, or like external versus internal circumstances, is they make it either entirely about the internal state or entirely about the external state. And I think that is just like using too blunt of a hammer here, and that's why I like Moshe's idea which is that the first half is describing, the guy who is an ani is going to be set up to have more difficulty than the guy who is an ashir, I guess, unless you're an extreme ashir, because that's the opposite problem, is that people who are extremely wealthy have a different set of problems. So that's the default. And also the default psychological thing is you will be unhappy. So it's acknowledging, I think, I guess maybe this is a bigger problem also. A problem in the genre of Musar, and by Musar I mean Mishlei Musar, but also like any form of Musar, is not acknowledging where you're at and where you're starting from. And I think Moshe's idea acknowledges, you're going to be set up for bad. Okay, now what do? You work on your lave, and that could like lead to Mishnah Tamid. So I think that's and I for some reason, you think that I would like the ideas that are more specific, but I like the non-specificity, and I think it fits with the generic terms here. And it could be that the next pasuk of Tov Aruchas Tov Ma'at B'Yiras Hashem, that might be identifying the specific quality here of Yiras Hashem. And maybe our pasuk is just, in other words, our pasuk might just be setting the groundwork for your internal state is what's important, and then next pasuk is telling you how. Yeah, Isaac.
Yeah, so I really like this idea because I feel like, like you're saying, I feel like there's a tendency to focus on one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I actually when I was in a bad situation at work,
Mm-hmm.
it was like I was having a conflict of like going from one extreme to the other of like wanting to like just blame my circumstances, and then being like, oh no, really I should be able to be happy anywhere because it's not
Right.
Because really it's all about the internal. But I
Right.
appreciate how the pasuk it says, put me on Iyun, like as like almost like a statement of fact, and then but then modifying it to a flave.
Right. So I think that brings up another point, which is that I do think that there is a level a person can get to where I don't want to say like they could turn it on and off like a switch, because I think developmentally you just become the type of person who is who's so much formed, whose experience is so so like high percentagely flowing from their lave, excuse me, that they are going to be happy even in bad circumstances. But I think it's important to recognize what Isaac is saying, which is developmentally, we are not at that point. So you can't just like expect, even if this is a true idea, you can't just expect to turn it on and just, like you can't just like, chin up, and like suddenly like all your experience is good, Yeah. Okay. So here's what I suggest that we do. Okay. I'd say the meforshim are in three camps. Okay. There's the sameach b'chalko camp, which is the majority. Then there's the ani b'das camp, who is the minority. And then there's like certain meforshim I can't really classify here. Okay, so instead of focusing on one of the meforshim after the other, let's just read through a couple of the meforshim in each of the camps, and then try to get whatever idea most appeals to us. Okay, so starting with the Matsudas David, which I'm just going to use this on screen here because it's bigger. Okay, so Matsudas David says, "Koime ani ra'im im." So this is an interesting point. Im ki matsui lo de machzora. Okay, so he's drawing a baseline, which is a question we also forgot to ask. Okay, which is part of the question of what does it mean by ani, which is if this is talking about material poverty, okay, how like dire are we talking? Okay, someone who has his basic needs but is like in a low socioeconomic economic state, or even someone who doesn't who can't eat. Okay. Yeah. So it is an interesting thing that that Matsudas David draws the line. Okay, he says, I think this is my understanding. In kimatsu lo de maksara. Okay, along with the fact that he has what he needs. So in other words, we're not talking about someone who can't afford to eat. Okay, so you got your basic needs. Okay, so what about him? He will be envious of the wealthy people in the wealthy who are wealthy in the nation. Okay, so this is the interesting thing, is like this is relative wealth. Okay, so if you are in a poor country in Africa, this might be being envious of the people who have their own, shelter, right? As opposed to people who have to share with multiple families. So we're not even talking about like some objective standard. We're just talking about the people in the nation who are wealthier than you. V'ra'ino b'shalahem, and he is jealous of them. Aval mishi, I think ra'ayin here means jealous. Okay, I know that ayin hara and ayin ra'a technically mean two different things, and also sometimes I think you can use this for like tov ayin as like generous, and ra ayin as stingy. I think it's pretty clear he means that it means envious. Okay, aval mish yesh lo leiv tov leval yera eno bezulaso, someone who has a good heart who is not envious of others, yismach bechalko, he will be happy with his portion. V'yamav nidmim lo tami kimei mishte v'simcha, and his days will seem to him constantly like days of Mishnah and Simcha. Yeah, Moshe?
I was gonna say, can't Vara Eino be a play on Vara Eincha for by giving to the poor person?
V'ra'a.
Meaning that's what it says. If you don't give him de machzero, Vara Eincha. I guess if like you turn away, or if it's bad in your eyes.
De machzoro. Yeah, I just want to see it visually here.
Should be like Dvarim $1 or something.
Ki fazok tiftach es yavcha v'havei tamitenu lo de machzoro asher yachzor lo. Ki sham lecha pen yehi davar im levavcha b'lial lemor karava shnasa sheva shnasa shmita v'ra'a einacha b'achicha. Nice. Yeah. Okay. That definitely could be okay, an allusion or a pun, depending on how much of a sense of humor you think he has. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just going to take note of this again. I want to do multiple meforshim here in this camp, but so it's interesting. Matzudas David says the main ingredient, or I guess the decision is jealous versus non-jealous. Okay, and if you're not jealous, okay, you will be sameach b'chalko. And I'm saying this because we're going to see now, I think that there are others who say no. The what's the word I'm looking at? The variable, the variable is sameach b'chalko, and then the result is mishte tamid. Okay, so let's look at Rבינו Yona, who's going to quote there's going to be a quotation from his Pirkei Avos commentary. So he says, hold on a second here. Okay, kol yimei ani ra'im v'tov lev mishte tamid. Bi'er, he explained, she'ein tov lev bichlal mash amar kol yimei ani ra'im, that tov lev is not included in what was said kol yimei ani ra'im. Okay, I think what he means, let's see, ki tov lev afal pishu ani, because someone who is tov lev, even though he is poor, hine tuv levavo kemishte tamid. The goodness of his heart is a mishte tamid. But pasuk hazeh gam ha'amur lamala leiv sameach yetiv panim hakdama el inyan haba achrei zeh. So this is all a preface to what is coming later. Okay, like my intuition said. Okay, so let's just see what he says though about this idea in Pirkei Avos 4:1, which is quoted in the footnote here. Ezihu ashir sameach b'chalko. So that's the Mishnah. Is who is wealthy, one who is happy with his portion. Omer dai li b'chalki. Achar she'ani yachal lefarnes es atmi v'es beisi v'lasok b'tor. Oh, I forgot to say this here. Hold on a second here. Matzudas David is assuming we're talking about someone whose basic needs are met. Yeah. Okay. So then we have here Rבינו Yona. Okay, who's I think this is a higher level here, or not higher level, but like meaning a higher standard here. Okay, assuming we're talking about someone whose basic needs and basic physical needs and basic Torah needs are met. Okay, I'll just reread that again. Okay, which is, he says, achar she'ani yachal lefarnes es asmi v'es beisi, sorry, whose basic physical needs and Torah needs are met for himself and his family. Okay, so he says, since I am able to have a livelihood for myself and my household and to be involved in Torah, umali l'mammon acher, why should I need someone else's money? Ach lios li k'dei tzarchi ulhakim es devar Hashem. as long as I have enough for my needs and in order to uphold the word of Hashem. Someone who's not content with his portion and not satisfied with what Hashem has given him, anihu, that person is poor. Pasuk. So he quotes our pasuk. Oh, so maybe he is like the Metzudas David. So ani is an ani is someone who yearns for someone else's money. Now, by the way, I think you can distinguish here between being jealous of someone else's money and yearning for their money. I'm not saying necessarily this terminology, but I think there is a difference between like wanting the equivalent of what they have or wanting what they have. I think those are two different emotions. One is like a low sachmod type deal, where you actually want to deprive them of what they have so that you can have it and not them. And the other is more like, oh, if only I could be as rich as that person. So I don't think Rubinio is making that distinction. I just want to make it here. So
mammon acher, is that someone else's money or additional money?
I think it's someone else's money. Same thing. L'mamon acherim is definitely other people's money.
Yeah.
Ra'im. Ki ohev kesef lo yispa kesef. As it says in Koheles, one who loves money will not be satisfied by money. Ach tov leiv v'smech b'choko kol yamav tovim. But someone who has glad heart and is content with his portion, all his days are good. Kimei ha'ose mishtatamid, like the days of someone who is making a constant party. Al kein mita tova hi ad me'od lio samech b'choko. Therefore, it's a good mita to be samech b'choko. V'honikra ashir. That person is called wealthy. Achar sh'Hashem yisbarach nasan lo b'meshi yisparnes v'yasok b'torah v'mitzvos. Because God, since God has given him what he needs as a parnasa and to be involved in Torah and mitzvos, okay, Koheles there. What advantage does a person gain by all of his toil that he toils under the sun? Torah mitzvos. All right, so this is a little bit unclear here to me. Okay, because he's throwing in a couple of things. Sameach b'chalko as if that's the good midah, okay, to either be sameach or not, and then throwing in misave l'mammon acherim, which has to do with like relative to others, but then also saying as long as you have enough to fulfill your Torah needs, So I just want to summarize the facts here. We're talking about someone whose basic needs and basic Torah needs are met for himself and his family. And ani is someone who yearns for someone else's money and will therefore be unhappy. But someone who is sameach b'chalko, that is the chelik that Hashem gave him, which is enough to be involved in Torah u'mitzvos, is an ashir. Now, I do think there's an overlap here, but I think there are two ways to talk about the quality of sameach b'chalko. I think there's let's call it I don't want to call it the extreme. I think there is a sameach b'chalko that is about no matter what chelik you have, and then there's a sameach b'chalko within the values of Torah and mitzvos, where you have enough to be able to fulfill Torah and mitzvos. In other words, I do think that the person who is, languishing and being tortured in Auschwitz, I think Rבינו Yona would not say that person. I think the Rבינו Yona would say that we're not talking about that person, but I do think there is what to say about that person. I don't think Metzudas David is talking about him either, But I just want to acknowledge, I think whenever you're talking about sameach b'chalko, you do have to ask, is it a chelik that is de machzor asher yachzar lo, or not even? Okay, and I think that there's let's say like in the Stoics or in the Buddhists or in our literature about like having a really, really bad chelik, maybe an Eov or whatever. I think there is a type of talk of sameach b'chalko even when you don't have your basic Torah needs fulfilled. All right, so just wanted to acknowledge that. I want to read a couple more, and then we'll try to get some idea here. So Meiri, very short here. Kol ani ra'im v'tov liv mishnei tamid lefia nigle davak im shelif lifnei panav. Ratzalamar imam pasuk leiv sameach yetiv panim. So according to the Nigle, this is connected to two psukim before this of leiv sameach yetiv panim. V'amar kol yimei ani v'hu oso she'eno sameach b'chalko. Okay, there's a guy who's not sameach b'chalko. Ra'im. Ki hu nivhal lahon, because he is nivhal lahon, which is an expression from Mishlei 28:22. Someone who is like behala is like anxious, or like let's say here, who makes haste. Yeah, meaning who's like clamoring for money. I think I would describe it as someone who's nivhal lahon ishra. Sorry, that's the pasuk, not the meiri. Nivalahon. Yeah, ve'eno lo tisba osher, and his eye is not satisfied with money. V'yom yom yosif machov nafsho latova, and each day he increases pain of his soul latova. Aval tov lev rotzlomer hasameach b'chalko mishtatamid. Rotzlomer hamistapek ve'omid b'simcha kiluhu b'mishtamid. He's content with enough, and he stays in a state of perpetual mishtatamid. Okay, yeah. And then I think I also saw Rashi. Actually, let me do the Rashi here. I think Rashi's in this camp. Let's see. Koime ani Rhyme. Oh. No, this is a little. Oh, yeah, he does. Okay. I don't know what Rashi's doing up here. Vafilu Shabbasos v'yomim tovim. Okay. So all his days, even Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, meaning I guess even when he is having an objective like party. Okay. Damar Shmuel, Shinui Vesas Tchilas Chuli Me'ayim. Okay, as Shmuel says, a change. So I looked at the English in Rashi because I associate Vesas with like Nida, you know. But here the English, at least in Rashi, says Vesas here means habit. Okay, which I that made me remember that Vesas does mean like your I think even like in English you say like for Nida like a cycle, you know. So the footnote here also says Mishane Vesas Hirgel the Ochel Yoser. So that's the beginning of intestinal disease. Okay. So in other words, so this is a funny thing, right? He's saying that like all his days are bad, even when he like treats himself, you know, it's gonna be bad. But he seems to be talking about physically bad. And then V'tov Lev, Misha Tov Libo Be'oshro, someone whose heart is glad with his is good with his money. Mishta Tamin Kosha Osav Domos Lo Yom Mishta. All of his hours are to him like a party. This teaches that a person should be sameach b'chalko. Now, Rabbeinu Darshu Bo Marsha Darshu b'chelek. Okay. Knowing Rashi, this is not a pun. Okay, I've never seen Rashi make a joke in his life, which so I don't think it's a sameach b'chalko pun. But I don't know how Chazal darshan this in Chelek. Yeah. So okay. So the question here is I'm just gonna say Rashi. Okay, Rashi emphasizes that someone who is not sameach b'chalko, sameach b'chalko, okay, even when he indulges in material wealth, okay, for example, Shabbos and Yom Tov, his days will be bad, okay. For example, he'll have stomach issues. Okay. So I think Rashi is slightly different in that he doesn't mention how you relate to other people's wealth. He doesn't mention, I mean, implicitly he's ruling out clamoring after wealth, but I don't know. It feels like Rashi's doing something different here. Okay. So the question is like, what idea can we get here beyond either the cliche idea or beyond what we already have? You know, and again, this is always the difficulty of going, you know, for there is a stage of learning and development where sameach b'chalko itself is a chiddush, and I'm not trying to downplay that. I just think that or I'll speak for myself, I do think that like I have integrated this idea intellectually that it's not a chiddush anymore. So the question is, what nuance is this adding to our baseline idea of sameach b'chalko? That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Could it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Isaac.
Yeah, I think there's a certain feeling of like that if you're not happy with, you know, if you're not happy that it'll take like just a change in circumstance to make you happy. Like I think you could have someone who like I think there's the reality of your circumstance, and there's also the reality of your internal thing. But I think there's a feeling of like defaulting to ascribing your unhappiness to your material circumstances, and saying you can see from the way that like even when your material circumstance is good, you're still unhappy. Meaning it's not just about your material circumstances, because even when you're indulging, you're still unhappy.
Oh, okay. All right. So all right. So for Rashi, I think that really works, right? So for Rashi, um uh this is a further raya against the assumption that your happiness is dependent on your material circumstances, because even when he indulges, he's not happy. Now, it is interesting here because, what's the reason for, again, I haven't looked into that Gemara he's quoting, but Shinu Vesis Holy Me'ayim. I mean, yeah, the reason why is because you're not used to like refined food, Like if a person never eats meat and then eats meat for Shabbos and Yom Tov, then yeah, it's going to affect his digestion. So it's just a weird idea to bring up. Yeah, Moshe, what do you want to say?
I was gonna say that couldn't it just be like a Mishlei practical example of Ezer Asher Sameach B'chalko? I mean, doesn't it come up often where there'll be a Torah idea that's, you could say, pretty obvious, like Yiras Hashem or something like that, and Mishlei is just giving a certain situation where it might occur.
Yeah, you could say that, which is that maybe this is just a Mishleic application, and I do think that the ideas that you guys said, I think fit that. So not a new idea per se, but but combating the emotional havamina. Yeah, yeah. I don't have any intrinsic problem with that. It's just I always want to assume that there is a nuance in the idea, in addition to just a new application.
Mhm.
And again, this is a little weird because even Rבינו Yona acknowledges that this is just a setup for the next pasuk. So maybe the Chiddush is coming. Okay, and this is just establishing the premise. Okay, let's briefly switch to the Das uh what do you call it? The Das camp. Okay. So you've got Sadigon who said, these are much shorter here. Ani hazeh eno rush ela ani badas. So this is not a pauper, this is someone who's poor in knowledge. Vasher lo seichel tov simchaso tamidis yoser min hayayin. Kamo she'anemar ki tovim dodecham yayin. Okay, so someone who has a good mind has perpetual simcha, like better than wine. Okay, as it says in Shir Shirim. Okay, then you got Rabag. Kol yame ani raim, kol mishu ani bed. Oh, interesting. I want to check and see if this is. I see. I would not expect Rabag to say that. I would expect him to say bedas, not bedeos. Oh, actually, no. Maybe he means deos in Rabagian. Kol yame ani mishu ani bedeos. Yeah, him rhyme. Yeah, I think he means deos is ideas. Ach mishu tuv seichel. Yeah, that's where I got it from. Tuv seichel, someone who has a good mind. Sameach b'chol yamav. Kilu yasem mishte b'chol yam. Im shetamid hu shose minachal adne ni'imos hadeos. Okay, because he's constantly drinking from the river of delights of the pleasantness of ideas. Okay. I think there was one other person who had this about Ani Badaas. I'm just trying to remember who it was. Okay, fine. So let's just say here. Okay, so you've got Rבינו. Oh, sorry, you got Sadigon and Rabag. Okay, is that this is talking about someone who has a good mind and good ideas, and therefore has access to a source of pleasure at all times, which is not dependent on material circumstances. Yeah. Okay. So I think this is a separate idea here, which is this is like a type of idea that I think Rebbe touches on the proof of learning shiur, which is that one of the many reasons why the greatest pleasure is intellectual pleasure is because it is so abundant and is so accessible at all times. Like, okay, obviously you cannot do this. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. The average person cannot do this when they're being, tortured in physical circumstances, unless you're a Rabbi Akiva. But most people, can have a source of delight from intellectual ideas. And just take a common example here is like the average, poor American whose experiences of pleasure are limited by like examples of physical indulgence. So they get home from work and they bemoan the fact that they can't take their family on a vacation, or they can't like indulge in like fancy foods or whatever, and that the sources of pleasure are inaccessible to them. But then take the poor Jew throughout history who gets home, has day machzor lo, and then opens up a Gemara or like discusses an idea, or not even a Jewish person, like Socrates was also not wealthy, but he has constant access to thinking, and so like I think this is a completely separate, not completely. This is not just another facet of sameach b'chalko. This is like sameach b'chalko is not taking a stance on where you're getting your pleasures from. It's just talking about a shift in away from a focus on externals. This is really identifying a source of pleasure, which is the pleasure of ideas. And I don't think anyone who's attending shiur here needs to hear this, but I do think that there are people who are in yeshiva, and I'm not just talking about our yeshiva, who are in yeshiva for even years, okay, and they may get skills, okay, but in addition to getting skills, another thing you have to do is, and hopefully this happens naturally, but you have to also condition yourself to being able to enjoy learning. And I say be able to because it's not a natural state for most people because of our messed up education system, that I think by nature human beings enjoy learning, but by nature most people hate school. Not by nature, but by default people will hate school because they have bad experiences. And so I think you need to, like, I've seen this problem happen. Like there are certain yeshiva guys who are so intent on the training aspect of it that they forget to stop and enjoy the learning. And I think like it's a very important thing, like enjoy the learning, because once you leave yeshiva and you have to like find time to learn, amid your busy working life, if you don't naturally enjoy learning, you're not going to make time for it. So like you have to cultivate the ability to enjoy learning. Yeah. Isaac, I saw your hand, but because we're almost over, I don't have to rush away, but I just want to read something here just to leave us off with, and then if people have to go, then they have to go. I don't know what the נחmiash is doing. Okay, so the נחmiash, and it's not him; it's quoting Chazal. Okay, this is bizarre to me. Okay, Kol Yemei Ani Raim V'Tov Lev Mishta Tamid. MS. The truth is, Mash Amr Chazal Ezu Asher Sameach B'Chava starts off strong. V'Nikra Tov Lev V'Chol Yamav Mishta V'Simcha V'Yom Tov. Okay, great. So that's the normal idea. But then he says, B'Perek Misha Mesu. I think this is. Oh no, sorry. Oh, sorry. That's in a different part. All right, fine. So, all right, we'll I'll read it anyway. Mish eno sameach b'chalko afilu yesh lo kama alfei zahav v'kesef hu nikra ani v'holim yamav ra'im v'al kein samach akra pasuk zeh. Okay, we're gonna just read this here. Tuv ma'at miyiras Hashem me'osa rav u'mehuma bo. Mehuma migizeras v'yaham Hashem asisara. Inyan shever v'kitus. So this is breaking. Okay. Kima yo'ilo kol mamon kimach eno sameach b'chalko. Okay. Now then he says like this: preparing misha meso kol yemei ani raim zen mishyesh lo isha ra'a. That's someone who has a bad wife. V'tov lev mishta tamid ze sheyesh lo isha tova. Okay. Tov lev is a good wife. Rabbi Yanai omer kol yemei ani raim ze istines. This is someone who's however you want to translate istines. Okay, whether that's OCD or like finicky. V'tov lev mishta tamid ze shadaito yafeh. This is someone whose, I think, state of mind is Yafeh. Rabbi Yochanan Omer Kol Yemei Ani Ra'im Ze Shadaito Ktsara Tov Le Mishta Tamid Mi Shadaito Rachava. That's talking about a narrow mind or an abstract mind. Omer Kol Yemei Ani Ra'im Ze Rachmani. This is someone who's merciful. Tov Le Mishta Tamid. Oh, is this the wrong bog? Okay, I guess I don't have the entire נחmiash. Yeah. So I think the thing that like is weird here is the particularity of this, especially the first two, especially the first one. I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying, like, as an interpretation of the pasuk, which seems to davka not be talking about your circumstances, it seems strange. Okay, anyway, that's just something to think about. Okay, if you gotta go, you gotta go. But Isaac, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say about what you were saying about enjoying learning, and
Yeah.
that has something he was, not only is it not a focus. I remember talking to someone who said that when he was in a yeshiva, he was told that he dafka should not enjoy learning because the Fumsara Agra.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that being said also. That's the most idiotic idea ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like condemning someone to a life of hating learning, you know? Yeah, someone once told me, not personally, but I heard him say you should dafka find area, like if you start to enjoy your sugya so much, you should go to an area that you hate. You know, because and this person was putting it in terms I think this is also two different bad ideas, but like you're saying in terms of the Fumsara Agra, this person was putting it in terms of lishma, that in order to be lishma, it has to be something you hate. Because if you enjoy it, then it's low lishma. Like,
I've heard that in high school. Someone's told me that they were like, oh, it's Gemara class next time. Like I rolled my eyes or I groaned or something, and they're like, oh, great, I wish I could be like you because it's so much more beneficial when you don't like it.
Oh man, what do they do with all of the like David Melech or Shir Shirim like rhapsodizing about how enjoyable and pleasurable learning and like Avas Hashem is? I mean, what is how messed up is that? Yeah, yeah.
I think that doesn't get discussed or learned.
So aren't you supposed to learn Mashli B'Chafetz?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, good ideas in the pasuk here, and I do think that there, I'm really happy with the ideas that we came up with. And it'll be interesting to see what the next pasuk does, because the next pasuk is a continuation of this, but we're gonna have to wait until yeshiva's not on break anymore, in order to learn that. All right, enjoy. Ezra, what are you gonna say?
This doesn't have to go on like recording or anything, but
Sure.
the Ibn Ezra, I don't know if you looked at it. He has a totally different take.
Okay, let me see. So this is the real Ibn Ezra or the fake Ibn Ezra?
The real one.
Real one. Okay, so real Ibn Ezra says, whoops, this is too big. All right, real Ibn Ezra says, "Koime ani ra'im, shishlo oni halev v'kois tami." That's interesting. He has poverty or affliction of heart, and is angry all the time. Ve'ein oni kamohu. There's no suffering like his. V'tov lev she'eno kois mehera. Mesim da'aga al libo. He doesn't get angry quickly, and he does not impose worry on his heart. Bimishte tamid yoel elav. It will benefit him. V'hulech sameach tami kilu ocha v'shoseh kol hayam. That is very interesting. Kas. Yeah, that is an interesting angle. Okay, yeah, so something to think about here. Okay, thanks for bringing it to my attention. Okay, everyone. Have a good day, and see you when we get back.
Bekius.
Bye.
Shows.